The road stretched endlessly ahead, a thin ribbon of asphalt swallowed by the dense, fog-drenched woods of Alabama. The night was still, unnaturally quiet, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. My RV's headlights flickered weakly against the mist, barely illuminating the skeletal branches overhead. I had always sought out isolation, craved the untouched wilderness, but tonight was different. There was something wrong about the air, something heavy and oppressive. And then, without warning, the engine died. Just like that, a cough, a splutter, and silence. I coasted to a stop on the side of the road, gravel crunching beneath the tires. Frustration bubbled up as I tried the ignition again. Nothing. No signal on the GPS. No signs of life for miles. Just me, my useless RV, and the oppressive fog that swallowed everything beyond a few feet. I stepped out into the night, flashlight in hand. The chill was immediate, biting through my jacket. The air carried a damp, metallic tang, almost suffocating in its weight. As I scanned the road, I saw it, a van, parked just off the road under the shadows of the towering pines. Its red taillights glowed faintly, pulsing in the mist like two watchful eyes. Relief washed over me. Maybe someone could help. I called out, my voice barely audible against the oppressive silence. Hey, anyone there? No response. As I approached, something felt wrong. The van was still, too still. Its paint was dark, almost black, and its surface shimmered faintly in the fog. When I reached it, I pressed my hand to the hood. Cold, ice cold. The engine hadn't run for hours, maybe longer. I peered through the windows. Empty. No driver, no passengers. Just a hollow, eerie silence. I tried the doors. Locked. That's when I heard it. A sound, subtle at first. A rustle. The snap of a twig. Then more. Deliberate, heavy footsteps in the woods. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I swept the beam across the trees. Shadows danced, but nothing moved. The van's lights pulsed brighter, casting an eerie glow that made the fog ripple like liquid. That's when I saw it. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, emerged from the mist. Its movements were jerky, its limbs too long, its head tilted unnaturally. My breath caught as it stopped, its silhouette shrouded but undeniably wrong. It turned toward me, and though I couldn't see its eyes, I felt its gaze pierce through me. My heart thundered as the van groaned beneath my hand. The van. It moved. I stumbled back, my flashlight beam shaking wildly. The figure didn't follow. It simply melted back into the fog, leaving only the oppressive silence behind. But I wasn't alone. The RV shook as something slammed against its side. Bang, bang, bang. I scrambled inside, locking the door behind me. My hands fumbled for the keys, desperate to start the engine. Nothing, just that hollow, mocking click. I turned, and that's when I saw it. Handprint on the window. Fresh. Wet. The shape was wrong. Too long. Too thin. My stomach churned as the RV rocked violently, the roof creaking under the weight of something moving above. I could hear it now. Scratching. Dragging. A sound so deliberate it made my skin crawl. And then, the laughter. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. The sound filled the air. coming from everywhere and nowhere, as if the forest itself were mocking me. The van's lights flared, their glow searing and alive. Shadows twisted and stretched, forming grotesque shapes that leered at me. And then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. I didn't dare move. My breath fogged the glass as I stared out at the van. Its lights had dimmed, but it hadn't left. It was waiting, watching, and then, in the fog, I saw them. Figures. Dozens of them. Their shapes were blurred, their forms unnatural, but their eyes, sickly yellow, glowing faintly, cut through the darkness like embers. They didn't move. They didn't need to. I realized then that the van wasn't just a van. It was part of something larger, something ancient and unspeakable. It wasn't alone, and neither was I. The van is still out there, watching, waiting. And if you ever find yourself alone on a foggy road in the middle of nowhere, pray it doesn't find you. The figures didn't move, but their presence was suffocating. They stood there, half shrouded by the mist, their glowing eyes fixed on me, like I was the only thing that mattered. My breath hitched as I tried to think, to make sense of what I was seeing. The van, it pulsed again, a faint hum this time, like a low growl buried deep within its metal frame. It wasn't just waiting, it was alive, feeding on my fear, orchestrating whatever horror was unfolding around me. I needed to move. Staying here was no longer an option. The engine refused to turn over, the same dead click mocking me over and over. Outside, the whispers grew louder, almost playful, like they knew I was trapped. I grabbed the flashlight, my hand trembling as I turned it toward the window. The beam sliced through the fog, landing on the van. It hadn't moved, but something had changed. The handprints. There were more of them now. Fresh, wet smears streaked the van's side, their shapes elongated and wrong. They trailed down to the ground, disappearing into the fog, and then I saw it. A shadow emerged from the mist. No, not one, many. They moved unnaturally, jerking and twitching as they grew closer. The light from my flashlight seemed to ripple as it hit them, like they weren't entirely solid. I froze. My mind screamed to run, but my body refused to move. The tapping started, first on the passenger side, then the driver's side, then the back. It was everywhere, surrounding me, deliberate and mocking. And then something landed on the roof. The RV groaned under the weight as it shifted. Whatever was up there, moving slowly, purposefully. The sound of claws. No, not claws, but something sharp scraped across the metal, inching closer to the edge. I clutched the flashlight tighter, my pulse pounding in my ears. The whispers outside turned to laughter, distorted and broken, as though the forest itself was mocking me. Think, Ethan, think. Get out of here. Now. My heart nearly stopped as a face slammed against the glass. It wasn't human. Its features were stretched, twisted into a grotesque grin that dripped with something dark and thick. Its eyes, bright, hollow orbs of yellow, bored into mine, unblinking. I screamed, stumbling backward, the flashlight clattering to the floor. The windshield began to crack under the weight of its face, hairline fractures spidering outward. I scrambled for the flashlight, my hands shaking as the whispers grew louder, the laughter more maniacal. And then, as if it had heard enough, the thing vanished. The silence returned, more oppressive than ever. I didn't dare look outside. Whatever that thing was, it was gone, for now. But the van remained. Its lights pulsed again, bright and rhythmic, almost inviting. And then I heard it. A voice. Not a human voice. It came from the van, low and guttural, speaking words I couldn't understand. They burrowed into my mind, clawing at the edges of my sanity. I stumbled toward the RV door, my legs weak, my thoughts scrambled. I needed to get out of here. I didn't care where I ran or how far. I just had to leave. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. The van loomed ahead, its glow dimming and brightening in that strange, deliberate rhythm. The figures were gone. The whispers had stopped, but the air still buzzed with an unnatural energy. And then I noticed something new. The ground was wet, not with dew or rain, but something thicker, darker. My flashlight revealed streaks of red pooling beneath the van, trailing off into the woods like veins leading to some unseen heart. The van groaned again, its metal frame vibrating as though it were alive. This isn't real. This can't be real. But it was. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, to run into the woods, to do anything but approach that van. And yet, I took a step closer. I reached out, my hand trembling as it hovered over the van's surface. The metal felt warm now, pulsing faintly beneath my touch, like the thrum of a heartbeat. And then the voice came again, louder this time, clearer. Run. Before I could react, the van's lights flared, blinding and searing, and a deafening screech tore through the night. The fog erupted around me, swirling violently, and the ground beneath my feet seemed to tremble. I turned and ran, the forest swallowing me whole as I sprinted blindly into the night. The laughter followed, echoing in my ears, the van's pulsing, light a beacon that refused to let me go. I don't know how far I ran or how I escaped, but the van never left me. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see its lights, hear its voice, feel its presence. So, if you ever find yourself alone on a foggy road in the middle of nowhere, and you see a van waiting in the shadows, don't stop, don't look, just run. Didn't stop running until my legs gave out beneath me. My chest burned. My breaths came in short, ragged gasps, and the world around me spun in a dizzying blur of darkness and fog. The forest was alive now, no longer still, no longer waiting. It felt like it was closing in, its branches twisting into grotesque shapes, the mist coiling like fingers reaching out to grab me. I collapsed to the ground, my hands clawing at the dirt as I struggled to catch my breath. The laughter was gone, the whispers silenced, but I knew better than to think I was alone. The van, its lights had disappeared, but I could still feel it, like a weight pressing on my chest, an unrelenting presence that refused to let me go. And then there were the figures, those grotesque shadows with their glowing yellow eyes. I couldn't see them anymore, but I knew they were watching. They were always watching. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling as I leaned against a nearby tree for support. The bark felt rough and cold beneath my hand, grounding me just enough to think clearly again. My flashlight, which had miraculously survived the fall, flickered weakly in my grip. Its beam cut through the fog in narrow, trembling streaks, revealing only more of the same: endless trees, endless mist, and an endless sense of dread. Get it together, Ethan. Focus. There's got to be a way out of this. The sounds returned, growing louder and more deliberate. Twigs snapped under unseen footsteps, and the whispers carried that same distorted, mocking tone. My pulse quickened as I spun in every direction, the flashlight darting across the trees. And then I saw it. The van. It was back, somehow, sitting just a few yards away, its taillights glowing faintly in the mist. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp. It didn't make sense. I had run so far, so fast, there was no way it could have followed me. But it had. The van seemed closer this time. Its presence felt more menacing, its lights pulsing like a heartbeat. The air around it shimmered, bending and twisting as though reality itself was warping in its presence. And then the voice returned. It wasn't just noise this time. It was speaking. Words I couldn't understand. Words that burrowed into my mind like worms, twisting and writhing. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voice was inside me now, echoing in the deepest corners of my thoughts. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. For a brief moment, I thought I was alone again, but then the fog parted, and I saw them. The figures. They were closer this time, their glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. Dozens of them, maybe more. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, as though they were puppets on invisible strings. Stumbled back, my flashlight beam shaking wildly as I tried to find a way out. The forest felt alive, its branches twisting and reaching, herding me toward the van. And then I tripped. I hit the ground hard. The wind knocked out of me as my flashlight rolled from my grasp. Its beam landed on something in the dirt, something I hadn't noticed before. A trail. It was dark, sticky, and unmistakable. Blood. A trail of it, leading from the forest straight to the van. My stomach churned as I realized the ground was soaked with it, seeping into the earth like an unholy offering. The whispers grew louder, the figures closer, their glowing eyes fixed on me, like predators circling their prey. The van's lights flared again, brighter than ever, casting the forest in a sickly, red glow. This isn't real. This isn't happening. But it was. The van groaned, its metal frame shifting and creaking as though it were alive. The blood trail seemed to pulse, almost as if it were feeding the van, fueling whatever nightmare I had stumbled into. And then I heard it again. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. The forest seemed to close in around me, the branches clawing at my face, the fog thickening with every step. The laughter followed, distorted and broken, echoing in my ears no matter how far I ran. And then the laughter stopped. The whispers were gone. I collapsed against a tree, my body trembling, as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The van, the figures, the blood. It was all too much. But deep down, I knew. The van wasn't done with me yet. The silence didn't last. It never did. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear it. The van. Not its engine, no. It didn't move like a normal vehicle. It hummed, low and insidious, vibrating through the air, through the trees, through me. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a presence, an oppressive weight pressing against my chest. And then came the whispers. They didn't sound like voices, not human ones at least. They were warped, twisting, layered on top of each other like a chaotic symphony, each whisper fighting to be heard over the others. They came from everywhere and nowhere, surrounding me, burrowing into my ears. My mind, I staggered forward, the flashlight flickering in my hand. The ground beneath my feet felt different now, softer, wetter. It squelched with every step, the sticky sound clinging to my ears like a memory I couldn't shake. I didn't know where I was anymore. The trees all looked the same, their gnarled branches stretching toward me like skeletal hands. The fog was thicker than ever, swirling in patterns that felt deliberate, purposeful. It was as if the forest itself was alive, guiding me somewhere I didn't want to go. And then I saw it again. The van. It stood in the distance, partially obscured by the fog. Its taillights pulsed, red and slow, like the heartbeat of a dying beast. But it wasn't where I had seen it last. It had moved again. I don't know how I knew, but I did. It wasn't just a machine. It was more than that. Something ancient, something alive. The laughter returned, faint and broken, weaving through the whispers. It didn't sound like joy. It sounded like mockery, like whatever was out there was enjoying my fear, savoring it. I shined the flashlight toward the van, my hand trembling so much. The beam danced erratically across the fog, and that's when I saw them, the figures. They were closer now, stepping out from the mist, one by one. Their movements were jerky, their limbs too long, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. Their glowing yellow eyes pierced through the darkness, fixing on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. The flashlight flickered again, and for a brief moment, everything around me went dark. No, 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 stay on. It was right there, close enough to touch. Its skin, or what passed for skin, was pale and stretched, taut over a skeletal frame. Its mouth twisted into a grin, wide and unnatural, and its eyes weren't eyes. They were empty sockets, yet somehow I knew it was staring at me. I turned and ran, the flashlight swinging wildly in my hand. The fog seemed to close in, wrapping around me like a living thing. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, and the laughter was everywhere. It wasn't just in the air, it was inside me, rattling around in my skull, filling every crevice of my mind. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. All I could do was run. The ground shifted beneath me, soft and uneven, and suddenly I was falling. Hit the ground hard. The wind knocked out of me. My flashlight rolled away, its beam landing on something I couldn't yet see. I crawled toward it, my hands sinking into the wet, sticky earth. And then I froze. It wasn't dirt. It was blood, thick and dark, pooling in the hollow ground like a living thing. My flashlight illuminated the trail, leading away from me and back into the fog, back to the van. No, this isn't real. This can't be real. The word echoed in my head, drowning out everything else. I tried to move, to crawl away, but my body wouldn't listen. The fog thickened, pulling me closer, and the van's lights flared, blinding and searing. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it chose me. But if you ever see that van, don't stop. Don't look. Just keep driving. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it chose me, why it followed me. But the van, it's still out there, somewhere in the fog. What happens if it finds you?